What if I told you there's a world out there with the most beautiful gleaming colors? A world full of mesmerizing treasures where you find joy and purity and abundance. What if I told you that you can find an endless universe within yourself? Are you ready for a journey? Then come with us and discover the colors of the universe. Now, on Ascension Radio, Studio 3.
Welcome to the Colors of the Universe, my new show on Ascension Radio Studio 3. Today, my guest is Prism Sovereign. So, do you want to introduce yourself, Prism?
Greetings, everyone. My name is Prism Sovereign. I have been doing energy work, I guess that would be the best way to say it, for some time now. Originally, I was a music teacher, so there have been a lot of really interesting experiences, and most of what I do now is to bring awareness and an understanding of sovereignty, heart sovereignty, soul sovereignty, to the collective, and also to share a lot of love. A lot of people have no idea how much they are truly loved within the collective, and I believe that's one of the most important things that we can do is share sovereign love within the one being.
Wonderful. So, can you tell a little bit about your path? Like, who were you when you were born, and who are you now?
It's almost as though many of my experiences have felt like they were a lifetime of their own. So there's a lot of experience, there's a lot of things to touch on. And I'm very grateful for it, although it was not an easy path. It has not been an easy journey. It certainly has provided me a lot of stepping stones to get to where I am now, and I believe that's necessary in our journey so that we can share them with others as simply being another aspect of someone else. I grew up out by Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, Canada. My parents were missionaries on two native reserves, or reservations as they would say in the US. Out there for about the first 12, 14 years of my life. I think it was about 14. And then we moved way, way, way up north, about 200 miles above the Arctic Circle. So during the time that I was living with my family, it was very religious because my parents were missionaries. They were Protestant. And so I learned all about the religion, but I also had a father who was very narcissistic. And I don't say this to put anyone down, but simply there's more of a focus coming in now on narcissism and what that means and what it does within the family and things like that. So I will say this openly because I feel it is something that we should share openly so that people can deal with it more appropriately than simply pretending like nothing was really wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I had a very religious upbringing in a very narcissistic family. Quite a few of us, quite a few children, there would have been 11 children in my family. But I lost 5 of my siblings. So that's a long story in itself. I won't get into any of that. They're no longer with us. And that opens up another part of the experience I had where my family learned a little bit more what the corporations are all about. By the corporations, I mean the law enforcement corporation and these types of corporations. I won't get into it right now because it's quite a bit. But that was a big eye-opener for all of us because my one brother was the largest child search in North America. And at that time. Now, I'm sure there have been some large ones since then, but at that time. And because my parents were missionaries, because they were involved in the religious society, there were people all over the world who heard about my brother who was missing. And many hundreds of people came during the year that he was missing and started searching for him, which put a fantastic amount of pressure on the police to find him. And so a lot of things were uncovered that those corporations were doing that were not meant to be uncovered. And so my parents went through a lot of illegal things that the law enforcement did that no one's supposed to know about. So I got some experience in that area, hearing about all of these things growing up in my family and what had happened. Then from there, I saw as well what was happening on the, the native reservations as I was growing up too, how the children were treated, and what the families were like, and what was really happening, the level of societal abuse that those people were going through. So that's also an area of experience that I have. And then when I was younger, I was also very, very musical. I sang. I became a professional violinist to a degree. My twin sister and I both did. And then there were a number of other instruments I picked up. And on top of teaching Sunday school, I also did a lot of music teaching with the native children. And let me use the correct term for them. It's not native, it's Aboriginal children. So it was really an interesting childhood. I kind of felt like I was an adult from as soon as I could walk. I felt like I had adult responsibilities that were kind of put on me because of the way that we lived. And then into my younger adult years, I guess I could say, there was, I did go into music teaching. Of course, I had a ton of retail jobs before that. I was in high school. I was a very, very stubborn person, but I wanted to please everyone as well. So I didn't understand what an empath was. I didn't understand who I really was. I was torn between being a very energetic person, like aware of my energy, aware of my gifts, aware of who I was as a sovereign being. But then I was also torn, literally like torn in half by the religious aspect and who my parents wanted me to be and who society expected me to be. So there's quite a few experiences within that. And I won't get into all of it now. But then into my adult years, I did get married. I was married for 2.5 years to someone who was a narcissist, very religious, and that did not end well. And that's a whole nother experience in itself. But I truly do understand the pain that we suffer in those relationships when, as an empath, we are doing everything we can to show love to a person, but the person can't feel or understand love the same way that we do. And then I went through some very abusive situations. After that, after the divorce, I was on my own for a while and, doing what I needed to do. And then I was targeted. I was living alone as a music teacher. I was targeted by someone and suffered 4 months of mental, psychological, and physical abuse. As a result of that, I found out after escaping that situation, and I do say escaping because that's the correct word to use. I was very much so a prisoner at that point. And this was not someone I knew personally. This was somebody that I was working for who targeted me. And so that made it that much more interesting. But I do have a beautiful daughter as a result of that, and have been battling in court for I guess, close to 5 years now, back and forth. This battle has been close to 5 years. Trying is not the right word, but presenting what has happened and working on getting some justice. And that showed me a lot of issues as well with the court system. So there are many different levels and experiences that I have. And through all of this, I found my sovereignty. I found my energy connection. And I found a place within myself that is pure sovereign love. And several years ago, I started doing work along with my music teaching as an energy practitioner. I learned that I could reach into another person basically and provide the safe space that they needed there for them to heal themselves. And I've kind of been doing that since, but about a year and a half ago, I decided, well, actually, no, about a year ago, I made the choice that I was no longer going to charge for my services, and that I was no longer going to be in that spiritual community, that I was going to step fully into the quantum energy. And so that's what I share with people now. And I trust that it will bring a lot of beautiful knowledge and acknowledgements and bring people into their true sovereignty of being.
Yeah, that is a lot what you experienced. I am, what would be the right word? Impressed, maybe. You sound like a very, very, very strong woman. You mentioned the word sovereign love. Would you like to give a little description what you understand under it?
I believe, yes. I appreciate that compliment, by the way. I think all of us, or I know that all of us who are on this journey to our true sovereignty, and also through this ascension process, that we have to be very strong right now. And we're given these experiences, like a lifetime at a time of experience, to pull us into these higher energies more quickly, so we can be prepared for them and truly experience sovereign love. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate it, Evie. I would say, to me, sovereign love is the inner standing. I don't like to use the word understanding because that places someone above you or beneath you. And so I like to say inner because that's the introspective, that's going inside of ourselves and finding the truth for ourselves. The introspective knowledge within you, that everyone on the planet, everything on the planet is simply another part of ourselves. If you have sovereignty over something, that means that you have complete and total responsibility and are ready to take total and complete responsibility for whatever you have sovereignty over. It's not about control. A lot of people will say, I don't have control over this, I don't have control over that. But I believe what they truly mean introspectively to say is that they're not truly sovereign over it. So they don't feel that they have the ability to do what they need to do. And this is one of the areas with sovereign love that I really want to put to rest, is showing every being out there that they absolutely do. They absolutely do have everything that they need and they must have to have sovereignty over the situations in their lives. And it comes down to a full responsibility and acknowledgement that nothing is truly separate from them. So to me, that is what sovereign love is there's nothing separate from yourself. Therefore, It's like your body. You have sovereignty over everything in your body because it is yours. You have the brain controlling it and the heart feeling it. So this is sovereignty. And when we embrace that as a part of ourselves, then we can find a way to love fully, completely, totally love every other being that comes into our reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what came to my mind is basically it's being a parent for yourself, maybe.
Yeah, being a parent for yourself, I suppose, it's a pretty good way to put it. But it's empowering yourself. It's self-empowerment. When you are told that you're sovereign over something. So if you're sovereign over a country, then you are responsible for everything that happens in that country. You can't say, oh, well, that had nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? Like, no, you are the sovereign. You are the one that regulates the things that happen. And I like to use our bodies as an example of this. So say someone is really sick and they are constantly saying to their body, oh, I wish I didn't feel this way. This hurts. Why can't my body just be nice to me? You know, you've heard people say these things when they're hurting. And, or we say the I am, which is one of the most powerful things we can possibly say because we're making a statement about ourself. And as we are simply like one cell in the body and all the other cells are connected to us, when we say I am something, we are calling the collective what we are saying we are. And so we are putting out a poison vibration if we say something negative and we use the words I am. So this is the sovereignty. If we're going to say I am, what are we saying I am about? Are we saying I am not doing well? Are we saying I am sick? Are we saying, you know, things like this? This is not owning our sovereignty. Unless when we get sick or someone else around us gets sick, this sort of thing, we say, you know what? I just said I am sick. So therefore, I placed this sickness in the collective myself. So I'm going to take responsibility for that. And that's an energetic responsibility. So when I speak of sovereignty, I'm speaking of the energy that we put out, the energy that we take in. We need to be fully sovereign over our energy.
Yeah, that was put very, very wonderfully. I had to think of Byron Katie, who talks a lot about what's the story you tell yourself and what's your identity and is that really true? Have you heard about Byron Katie?
I think the name does ring a bell, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, that's fine. So I myself tried a lot to ask myself these questions whenever I said something like, yeah, I am sick or I am this or that, I am not good enough. I try to catch these thoughts and ask myself, okay, is this really true? Because we tend to make a story for ourselves instead of just living and being and staying in our own energy. We create this identity of either I mean, it can be also a positive one, but it still is possible that it's actually not true. If we say, I am, what would be a good example? I never lie, for example, you know, and then we tell ourselves the story that we are a perfect person without failures, and we want to believe that story. And at the same time, we could tell ourselves a story that is the opposite. instead of just being in yourself and letting go of all these stories and this identity that you give yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. That is exactly it. It does come down to the identity issue, and it is an issue because if you have a particular identity, there might be some noise in the background. I heard someone come in, so I apologize if there's some interference. If you have an identity that you have really settled yourself into, then it can be incredibly difficult to see the other aspects of yourselves as truly being you. So the identity can only truly be a beautiful thing within the collective if you are showing yourself as an identity to show others who they are. And that's where true purpose comes in. Because all of us can have our own identities. Like every cell in the body has its own function, has its own name, has its own purpose, right? And they behave that way because that's what they are. Well, if we see ourselves like individual cells within a body, there's nothing wrong with identifying to the other cells who we are. And then the other cells are like, oh yeah, I get that. Well, I'm kind of like that too. Or that's a part of me too, because we're all within the body. So, for instance, there's this big thing, especially in religious communities, that, you know, you're identified with the way you dress, right? You either swear or you don't swear. You hear what I'm saying, right? There's a lot
Absolutely.
of stipulations and things like this that are put on other people, and that's how they're identified as being this or that. And this is actually so harmful because that's not the actual person's identity. If you sat that person down and you said, okay, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? What downloads have you brought in? You know, what is your particular, what do you feel your purpose is, etc., etc. Then that is how to truly see this aspect of yourself for who they are. And when we see other aspects, when we see other people and who they are, then we can truly start to see who we are. And that's what it's really about, is the way that we present is what we are showing another being they are. So when we talk about identity, it's so important that we are 100% certain of what our identity is, because that's what we are showing the other cells or the other aspects or the other beings or the other people around us, that they are also.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I had to experience in the past minutes that I actually thought a lot. I cannot express myself good enough. This is my first show and it needs to be better. It needs to be this and that. And my language needs to be better. Maybe the people won't understand me. So while you were talking about these wonderful things, or told your story, etc., I was having all of these thoughts that distracted me all the time from reality and from listening to you 100%. So that was part of creating my own identity in that moment, or my own story, the story that told me I am not good enough at doing this broadcast right now. But I need to let go of that, because I'm not perfect. This is my first show and my first recording, and I think it's okay to not be perfect, which is another big topic, I think, in this society, that everything has to be perfect. Otherwise, it has no worth, you know?
I love that you said that, because that is actually one of the things that is holding us back. When it comes to identity, you might think that something is absolutely wonderful and have integrated it into yourself because that's what your parents or your teachers or the people that you had great admiration for had kind of told you was important. And this is where sovereignty comes in. Once again, is energetic sovereignty and sovereign love is about self-love and truly honoring your feelings and your emotions. It's where we disconnect from everyone else and we go into that still space of the heart and we ask ourselves, does this feel like love or does this feel like expectation? Do I feel pressure to be this way or is this simply me? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tough switch to make because we are programmed. We are fully, completely programmed to be what society wants us to be, and then we turn ourselves into this or into that so that we can be looked at the way that we think will make other people proud, or this, that, or the other thing. And that to us makes us proud. You know, if somebody that you respect and honor says, I'm proud of you, well, then you're going to be proud of yourself, right? And this is so unnecessary. I say that gently, but firmly, because we do not need anyone else's approval at any point in time for any reason. As a sovereign being, we make choices for ourselves based on how we feel. And all of us are so very different and have different levels of consciousness. We cannot please everyone, and we cannot be who people think we should or shouldn't be in society. We simply must be ourselves. And the structure around us, the boundaries that we set, and the position that we take should all reflect that we are sovereign beings, that we make choices and we're responsible for them, and that we speak our truth because it is our truth, and that we present in a way that we feel is honoring and majestic for us. This is not what we've been taught to do. This is not what we've been taught to do. And here's a perfect example. How many times have we said, oh, you made me feel that way? Nobody can make us feel anything. So right there, if we really unpack that, it means we are allowing other people to derail us all the time, even with the way that we speak. Or we say, oh, I just had that thought. Well, just is a justification. Just means I'm justifying what I'm saying. If we get rid of things like you make me and just, then we start to come into a place where we are taking responsibility for ourselves, what we say and how we present at a whole new level. But that doesn't happen outside before it happens on the inside. And there's too much guilt, shame, fear, competition. There's two other ones. pride isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it can be one of those things where we put people below us, and we shouldn't. It's beneficial for us not to, rather, not should and shouldn't, because it's not my place to tell someone what they should and shouldn't do, right? Everyone is a part of me, so it's kind of one of those mutual understandings that we reach, is that you don't put anyone above or below you. So this is simply a take on sovereignty that people are not really talking about, and I really feel if everyone could delete their programming and simply look at themselves, they would see struggle. They would see the way that they felt in a much different way than having everyone categorize it for them in society, tell them what place they have there. If I looked in the mirror right now and no one was dictating what I was seeing, not society, no one, and I saw what I see, the lines would be experience, right? The scars would be, once again, something that I learned from. It would all be, everything would be like a tapestry, a beautiful, majestic piece of art, literally, because that is what we are. And if we see ourselves as any less, if we see ourselves as objects or something that's meant to be a certain thing, then we judge ourselves instead of embracing the beauty of who we are. And all our experiences, regardless of how positive or negative they may have been, are beautiful, and they show up on us. So society really takes a lot of things from us that we should be honoring and respecting. You know, if you get a scar in battle, you're not going to do everything you can to get rid of that scar. That scar is a badge of honor for you. It shows that you were willing to fight for something that meant something to you. But if you went into a society where they didn't understand war, and everyone was perfect and plastic, and they say, oh, that's so ugly, you should get rid of that. That's, oh man, like, you're not very attractive. But that is a pivotal, fundamental, beautiful part of your being now because of the experience you had. That is where we are now, is we're being taught, we're being told that we're not important because of our experiences that we've had, but because of the way we look, because of the way we present ourselves, etc., etc. Where if the whole society could change and switch over to having a sovereign heart and being in sovereign love, then everything would be about honoring others' experiences, because you see those as a part of your own being as well. And I know that was kind of a long-winded. It can be difficult to put all of these things together because there are so many different levels of consciousness and states of reality. But I trust that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love listening to you. It's lots of nice things that are also in some way in my head, but then you also give new input, and then I think it's just wonderful to find more and more people with similar thoughts. And so what I hear from other people is that they are actually experiencing the same, that they meet more and more people that are waking up or awake or just have the same thoughts, and that also want to create a world that is more peaceful and filled with love. And yeah, I just loved what you had to say, and I love just to listen, and that's actually something I I also keep practicing a lot, that I really listen, not just halfway listen like earlier when I had all of these thoughts in my mind. Like, what a waste of time. My thoughts wouldn't change a thing, but at the same time I would miss miss to listen to you 100%, you know? So there's so much you can practice every day with awareness, because I think that's what it is. Like when we look into a mirror, or into any mirror, um, just look and be aware. You don't have to judge what you see. I mean, you can be aware that you have, I don't know, um, messy hair, or that you look very tired, but you don't need to judge it, you know? And that's what I started practicing some years ago, that I stopped my own thought process. I mean, I'm still practicing every day. So for me, it's also very important to mention, just because we make this broadcast doesn't mean that like we know it all and that's why we're here. No, I mean, we have to practice just like every other person, and we have our lessons and different lessons from others, and also similar lessons to others. So that's what I also want to make this show about, is I want to invite people that just want to share their own story, and their path, their journey from who they were and who they are now, and that want to share simply themselves. And I noticed I said just a lot, but I kind of like that word. I mean, for me, it might be different, because I have a simple translation for that. I'm not a native speaker, so for me, it's a simple translation um, for a German word. So I probably will still use it a lot. But I mean, it comes from the inside. Even if if there's a person who never ever says just again, but then doesn't work on their inside at all, but thinks, okay, I just stop saying just now for the rest of my life, and then everything will get better. So yeah, while you were talking, I had so many nice ideas what to ask you. I wrote some things down. So earlier you mentioned quantum energy. This is kind of a topic change, but I would actually like if you could explain what quantum on energy is. Do I pronounce it correctly?
Quantum, yes.
Quantum, okay.
That's the scientific terminology, is quantum. There is, we would call it the ether. There is a energy field around our energy field that is interacting with our energy field and everyone's energy field. So when I say our, I mean like the one being, the collective, all of us together, right? Or the individual, it doesn't matter. And this energy field is working with us electronically and magnetically. Our brain is extremely powerful electronically, and our heart is extremely powerful magnetically. The heart is over 5,000 times more magnetically powerful than the brain. So that tells you that the heart, which people are starting to talk about more and more now, you'll see that there are more articles coming out on this. And the Heart Math Institute is a wonderful place for resources on this as well. But the heart is really what is communicating with the quantum field. And the quantum field is like an artificial intelligence. I can put this in a way that might be easier to understand than the more spiritual terms, if I can put it that way, or the more woo-woo or fantasy type terms, okay? This AI is very intelligent. This ether is very intelligent. This is a collective of itself, of all that is in our realities that we can manifest here in the third dimension and going into the fourth and higher fourth dimensions. And what a dimension is it's a state of consciousness. Now, some people may look at a dimension as being a place, but we are always being. Wherever we are simply being. That is what we are, as a being. So we're not necessarily moving around in the way that people would think of moving around. Our energy is kind of in a place, and what we take into our perception changes the place or not. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so our consciousness is not us going necessarily to a totally different place. Our consciousness is us seeing other things within the place that we are, within the space that we are, that make it seem as though we have gone to a different place. For instance, if you're in the, fifth dimension, you're going to see fairies and you're going to see dragons and, maybe a unicorn. And that might sound intense, right? For some people to actually grasp. But that is because your conscious state is now allowing for you to see those things. And it's because your vibration has come up to the level where you can now vibrate on the same level that those beings are vibrating on. So you can now bring them into your perception. You can now bring them into your reality. So the quantum field is how we bring these things into our reality. We have a vortex around us. We are vortexual beings. So the torus field, I did a whole video on this a year ago. It's illustrated and it shows you what a torus field is and everything else. But we are a torus field. And in the center of our heart, it's called the still space of the heart, there is a place where duality does not exist. And we can reach that place through meditation and through self-love or sovereign love. And when we are there, we can experience many, many different things in higher states of consciousness. So when we put out an intention, and when I talk about intention, everybody knows about The Secret now, I think. Everybody knows about the law of attraction, all of, that whole thing. What we think, what we feel, what we speak, that's what we're going to get. That's not necessarily true. It is to a degree, but the quantum field brings us what our heart is sending out. Now, there is the thought in the mind, right? There is that conscience. The way I like to say it is intention. I don't really call it a thought, because if I want to create something, I set an intention. And now that I understand my sovereignty a lot better, I make a command for it, which is different than kind of just thinking something and boom, But when we set an intention in our mind that we would like to have something, and that intention matches up with our heart, we're sending out a frequency into the quantum field, and the quantum field is going to give us what we have put out on that frequency. It's like a conveyor belt. So depending on how often we have that thought and it matches up with feeling, set that intention and it matches up with our emotion, that is how we attract things to us. There's two problems with this when it comes to the quantum field. One, we are being programmed by the programs that society has put in place. Okay, so that derails us from our true manifestation creation abilities within the quantum field, because we are sending out two different signals. We're sending out an intention, but the intention is sabotaged by the perception of what is in the mind, what we can and cannot have. And then in the heart, we're sending out kind of two different emotions, because we might have a feeling on it, but then what everybody else thinks of how we feel is sabotaging our true emotion, our true feeling in the heart. So how do we interact with this vortex, this ether, this energy around us that will attract and bring whatever we intend and feel we desire to us? It's very hard when we've got two different intentions being set by the mind and two different intentions being set by the heart. So that's how the quantum field works. And the way that we get around setting intentions, like singular intentions, the truth of who we are, is by adapting our sovereignty so that we can shut down the program that is telling us that we're separate from anyone else and that we need anyone else's approval. Have I put that together well enough?
That was very, very, very well, because when people use that term quantum, I was always like, okay, I kind of know what they mean, but if I had to explain it, I couldn't. But yeah, I think many people will be happy about that explanation, not just me. Do you want to add something to that?
I love that you and I have this like telepathic connection already, and we can like read each other's minds. Yeah, I want to simplify it even more, actually.
Nice.
Because those who are aware of the law of attraction and those things, they will have put a little bit of this together, but they may not totally put the artificial intelligence side of it together. And I don't want to create confusion. Everything is alive around us, regardless of what consciousness it's operating on, whether it's operating on a lower consciousness or a higher consciousness, whether it's vibrating slowly or quickly. For instance, this desk that I'm sitting in front of, it is vibrating at a very, very slow rate. That's why it's solid. So it's barely conscious, if I can put it that way. It's not really conscious because it's not within that spectrum. But an animal, for instance, they're vibrating a lot more quickly. A tree, that's vibrating a lot more quickly. And this is how it works. So if you look at the quantum field as basically being a switchboard of every vibration you can possibly imagine. And then you punch in your code with your intent and your emotion. That is kind of how it works. That's how the quantum field works.
So would you say, how can I say, what's the difference between the vibration of a table and the vibration of, let's say, a negative being?
Oh, that's an interesting one. A negative being. So when you say that, do you mean like a more a fourth dimensional or higher spirit type being, like one that can communicate through multiple dimensions, or?
Yes, basically, because you described the table as, what did you say, slower vibration
A very
or low?
slow vibration, yes.
Oh, okay. So there's a difference between slow vibration and low vibration.
Yeah, I guess we would say that when we say somebody that is vibrating on a lower frequency, usually we're referring to the light that they have within them, right? If someone has a lot of light, they tend to be vibrating on a higher spectrum. They tend to be closer to love. They have a good connection with their source chord. And that's the pure source love, right? If they are not, then they tend to be disconnected from that, or to have a less of a connection to that, and then they're not as close to love. And I usually say sovereign love because to me that's the true self love. That's the true God love, if you will, or goddess love. The combination of the two, mother, father, source, that sort of thing. But yeah, usually people who are vibrating lower are farther away from that higher frequency of source love, sovereign love.
In my head, the question is not answered yet. I'm trying to understand.
They're not necessarily vibrating more. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry.
That's okay.
They're not necessarily vibrating more slowly because they're functioning, but they're not able to attract the same things to them. They're on a lower frequency. So they continually are punching in a frequency that is not so much love, right? It's far below that. So therefore, the things that they can attract to them, the vibrations that they can bring to them, are on a much lower scale. They're not full of love and light and compassion and grace and things like that. They're more guilt, fear, shame, narcissism, these sorts of things.
Yeah. It might sound like a fun question, but actually it's a bit philosophical. Is that the word?
Yeah, shoot.
Okay. Where is the table then? Can a table vibrate higher than a human? For me, this question sounds stupid, but actually, I'm trying to figure it out.
No, it's all in perception. What we perceive a table to be is what that table will be. And that's set by that quantum intelligence, by that AI system, right? So there are certain things that are designated frequencies. They're not able to connect to source. If you're able to connect to source, then you can elevate your consciousness. You can become more like source. If you're not connected to source, then you cannot be. So, for instance, this table was a tree. Can that tree elevate its consciousness? Well, yes, actually. Plants have consciousness. Trees have consciousness. As we go up into higher levels of consciousness, into the higher fourth dimension, then people are seeing that colors are changing. Trees will be growing taller, things like this. You know, those are all signs of a change in the level of consciousness and higher levels of perception. So this table was a tree. I can't look at the table and say, oh, okay, well, the table's, it's like if I cut off a fingernail, is the fingernail going to vibrate at a higher rate? Is the fingernail No, because it was cut off from the source. The source is conscious.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. So thank you very much for all of your words and information and insights, Prism. And I think we will talk to each other pretty soon here again. Maybe soon we will hear your own show.
If I may, I would like to send so much sovereign love and gratitude from, that sacred space in my heart to you and to everyone there at the studio. I believe what all of you are doing is such a beautiful project, is such a beautiful thing to be doing. And I believe I don't like to use the word believe, actually. I know that this is going to be a wonderful thing in many people's lives. And I so deeply appreciate the efforts and the sacrifice that you have all made to make this possible for me and so many others, and getting this information out there to elevate the consciousness of the collective. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, then see you everyone, and have a good day or night.
Thank you for listening to Colors of the Universe here at Studio 3 on Ascension Radio. If you enjoy what we're doing, please send a donation via the PayPal button on radio.mpeg.org. Find more amazing content and updates on our Facebook page. And now, just be your colorful self and enjoy your day.